Hi, everyone. Thank you for joining Chesapeake Legal Alliance today for the Power of Service, a look at CLA's Pro Bono Outreach Program. Before I get started, I'd like to first go over a few logistics. You have all received a Zoom link and a telephone number by email this morning. If you are having any audio issues, please join us using your phone. Sometimes Zoom can be a little finicky. And you can call in using the number on the screen. Also, if you have any questions, please type them into the chat, and we would love to hear your thoughts and questions. We would really like the end of our presentation today be a general discussion with the group. The webinar is being recorded for future use. Many of you know this, but Chesapeake Legal Alliance is a nonprofit organization dedicated to restoring the health of the Chesapeake Bay and its watershed. CLA provides free legal services to hundreds of community members and environmental advocates working to protect the health of the watershed and its communities. And today, you will get a behind-the-scenes look at how we provide over $4 million of free legal services every year. Chesapeake Legal Alliance works throughout the watershed. We work all the way from Cooperstown, New York, down to Virginia Beach. We provide assistance through staff assistance, as well as our wonderful volunteer network of attorneys, some of whom you will meet later today. In order to provide assistance to clients throughout the watershed, we need to complete client outreach. CLA has a vast client outreach program. We participate in work groups, coalitions, we build relationships with communities and river keepers and watershed organizations, and we attend conferences throughout the watershed. We don't want any community member in the Chesapeake Bay region to feel unsupported in their legal fight for a clean and healthy environment. We want to ensure that communities know CLA is available to help them. CLA strives to be a community resource. When a client needs assistance, Chesapeake Legal Alliance first meets them through our volunteer intake form. Clients fill out our intake form at www.chesapeakelegal.org/help if anyone out there today is needing assistance. Once we receive the assistance request, we work as a team at Chesapeake Legal Alliance of staff attorneys to review the matter for mission and need. We learn about the client's need for assistance, the issue that's going on in their community, whether it be water pollution or a land use dispute going on nearby. After we have this discussion, we think about, what is the legal issue? Is there a legal issue here? Is there one that's just on the cusp that we need to work to develop? Does a complaint still need to be filed with the state? And after that, we help the client prepare their case to receive attorney assistance. We do this with the help of our community legal education program at Chesapeake Legal Alliance, which has provided enormous support by developing client checklists to submit complaints, to work with the state to better understand what's going on with their community by maybe filing information requests. And then once the case is fully developed and ready for attorney assistance, we send it out either to our volunteer network of attorneys, or we work with staff to see who on board may be best to help the client. Luckily, we have a larger team since our merger with Environmental Action Center, and we're more efficiently able to provide these direct services to clients and get them answers immediately. It's really nice when a client calls us up to be able to tell them we have something to help them right away instead of waiting for a volunteer attorney to pick up a case. And in addition, we're also giving attorneys more prepared cases to help them with their next steps in providing the free legal assistance. CLA provides a variety of services. We talk about it as legal assistance, but it's legal and policy services. It's innovative legal strategizing and community legal education. Being members in the community and in the watershed, CLA attorneys are able to fully evaluate our matters to ensure that we are providing a holistic approach that will help the community. And we don't just work on environmental matters. CLA covers a variety of areas of law. So our volunteer attorneys work on administrative law issues, contract law issues, corporate law issues. We've helped groups with mergers. We've helped groups form themselves as 501c3 nonprofits. And our volunteer attorneys have also helped on transactional issues. So although the CLA staff is most adept to provide environmental legal assistance, we have this network of attorneys to provide a variety of assistance. This gets us into how we work as staff with our volunteer attorney networks. It's a spectrum. CLA staff can provide 100% assistance to clients on matters. And that's what you see on the left-hand side of the screen. But as we start to develop towards network attorney full representation, we see many ways for attorneys to work together with CLA staff, whether it be through providing procedural support to CLA attorneys on a case or researching a specific environmental legal issue inside of a case development or investigation that we're working on. We also have co-counseling opportunities to co-counsel on cases with CLA staff attorneys. This is great for new associates and people, a realm of spectrums of where they are at in their legal career and spectrums of where they can help with assistance. So we help on basically everything and everything in between. We try to provide, like I said before, this holistic approach to attorney representation. And if we go to the right of our screen to network attorney full representation, we can start to learn a little bit more about our volunteer attorney network. Our volunteer attorney network is made up of amazing volunteer attorneys, not to compliment them too many times in this presentation, but we have solo practitioners, we have small and large firm attorneys, we have new associates that participate, we have retired government attorneys, recent graduates, a wide variety of people who help provide these free legal services throughout the watershed. And together, they come to Chesapeake Legal Alliance to find this assistance in order to provide those services. So without further ado, I would love to go ahead and introduce you to our panelists today. Today we have joining us Jenny Morowitz, Ryan Kennedy, and Mary Clemenson. I'm going to ask each of them to introduce themselves and answer a quick few questions. So if you each could join us via video, it would be great to have you tell us more about who you are, where you work, how long you have been a volunteer with CLA, and your favorite Chesapeake Bay food, to throw something fun in there. Jenny, do you want to start?
Sure, I'd be happy to. My name is Jenny Morowitz, and I am a partner at Kirkland & Ellis, so a big law firm, and I lead strategy and operations for our environmental, social, and governance and impact investing practice. I volunteered with CLA for the first time last year, working with another attorney in my practice group. And let's see, my favorite food has to be blue crab.
All right, I'll go next. I'm Ryan Kennedy. I'm a senior litigation associate with Dunlap and Ludwig, which is a smaller national firm. I'm in their Tyson's Corner office. I've been a volunteer with CLA for probably coming up on about 4 years. I used to work for myself at a office in Annapolis as a solo practitioner, and I really wanted to get involved in some of the work that CLA did. It was recommended to me, so I signed up. My favorite Chesapeake Bay food, I honestly don't really like crab, so I have to say fried oysters.
Hi everybody, I'm Mary Clemenson. I work for the United States Environmental Protection Agency, and I'll take a second there to pause and just note that I am speaking in my individual capacity today, and I won't be speaking on behalf of the agency. And prior to that, actually, I worked for Chesapeake Legal Alliance. I'll get more into that in one of the later questions, I think. And I here at EPA, I work for a group that focuses on general counsel issues. So it's the Office of General Counsel, and specifically, we focus on solid waste and emergency response issues. So if you think of like Superfund sites, I do a lot of cases or projects within that realm, and that has some overlap sometimes also with water issues at times. But prior to that, did a decent amount of water law work and other environmental issues as well. So I do focus on environmental law issues. My favorite Chesapeake Bay food, that's really hard. I love so many foods that come out of the Chesapeake Bay. Crabs, I'll eat your oysters, Ryan. If you don't want them, I'll take them. But I think one of my favorites, it's like uniquely Chesapeake Bay, is the Smith Island cake, which I had never had until being in the Chesapeake Bay region, which for those of you that aren't familiar, it's a white layered cake that has like chocolate frosting in between, but it's like these really thin layers of cake. I think it's like 10 layers or more oftentimes, and it's delicious and something I really love from the Bay, even though it's not from the water.
That's a great food. I love the cake. I love crabs. I'm iffy on oysters, I gotta say, but it's so nice to meet all of you. And I hope the audience today is enjoying meeting you as well. So we can go ahead and move forward with questions. First, I would love to hear what made you decide to volunteer with Chesapeake Legal Alliance. Ryan, do you want to start us off this time?
Yeah, sure. Well, first, I had always wanted to be involved in environmental, real estate, land use type litigation. That was something I was interested in after a clerkship I had in law school. My career hadn't really gone in that direction. I found myself in a general practice, a lot of criminal defense and family law. So I was always looking for an opportunity to sort of get my foot in the door there to sort of change directions of where my career was going. And someone recommended to me, you should volunteer for CLA. You know, there's plenty of pro bono organizations for all kinds of areas of law, but this was a very unique kind of, it sounded very unique. And so I feel personally convicted about I feel personal conviction for the things that CLA does. And I also find, you know, some of that, you know, questions presented by environmental law, land use law, be something very interesting and fundamental about what we do, what we are able to do as attorneys, and who we are as a society. It just feels like a more, a greater purpose in giving back than, you know, I might get in any other day coming to work. So that, you know, that was one of the reasons. That was the main, you know, there's a good synopsis of why I went to volunteer for CLA.
Jenny, do you want to join us next? Does that ring any bells for you, or is your motivation different than Ryan's?
Sure. No, I think some of the same motivations. I mean, I guess, you know, starting at sort of the highest level, I mean, I think pro bono work is important for all attorneys to do. And it's certainly something that my law firm places a lot of emphasis on. You know, we expect all of the attorneys at our firm to do pro bono work, but we give them a lot of flexibility in terms of deciding what that pro bono work will be. So, you know, I'm very passionate about conservation, and my job certainly intersects with conservation in many ways, but the opportunity presented by, you know, some of the work that CLA does just feels a lot more tangible, right? Like you're sort of on the ground working, you know, with an individual client on like specific projects, and you know, I feel like you get to see the result maybe a little bit faster and a little bit more direct way than you do with some of the other work that I do. So I and another attorney, like I said, within my group, responded to one of those network blasts that you noted when a project caught our eye that was appealing, one, because it was not a litigation opportunity. I'm not a litigator. And so we're looking for something that would apply some of our transactional skills, or utilize some of our transactional skills. And so this, that opportunity presented that, and also gave us an opportunity to collaborate with some other attorneys at Kirkland. So I can talk a little bit more about the specific project later on, but like I said, it was a great opportunity. So we jumped in.
Jenny, can you tell us where you live real quick?
Sure. Yeah. So the notwithstanding my DC signature line, I was one of the early pioneers on the work remote thing. I started doing it before it got trendy in 2020 and everybody else jumped on the bandwagon. My home is in Anchorage, Alaska.
So I think it's really great to look at that and see how we can have volunteer attorneys from across the nation and outside of the United States, contiguous United States. So it's really wonderful to have you and to think about how you care about the watershed all the way in Alaska as well. Mary, why don't you share with us what made you decide to volunteer?
I think just sort of jumping off of what Jenny said, there's a huge untapped need for legal services. And that's something that I heard about during law school, and I saw a little bit of as I was a new young attorney working with different nonprofits and other organizations. I just saw I had a fellowship right out of law school where, it was a great nonprofit, but they had pretty, strong, but limited legal resources. And so that's something I had seen. And then also, I'm personally barred in the District of Columbia, and there's a bunch of network of robust organizations that provide pro bono services. And so I used to be, and even at times now still will be involved in pro bono work that way, because the amount of need sort of in every category is really huge. So I think it's really imperative and important that attorneys, to the extent they can, dedicate time to pro bono work. And then I came to specifically, work with CLA because I actually worked for CLA. I was hired as a staff attorney and worked for CLA from 2016 to 2019. And so I actually ran the pro bono program. So I sat in Hannah's chair before. And so I kind of had this like firsthand knowledge of just what the CLA model of providing service looks like, and got to see and really enjoy the work with the individual clients and the communities. I mean, I could talk probably for an entire hour about how CLA is unique and different. So I'll spare everybody that, since I'm sort of a biased, I guess, panelist in that sense. But that was my exposure to the work that CLA does, obviously, and just the type of communities and projects that can be worked on through that. And then when I left CLA, it was actually to work for a small law firm in DC called Jill Grant and Associates. And I met the main partner there, the founding partner, Jill Grant, of that firm through CLA, because she was a volunteer attorney with the CLA Pro Bono Network. And so a relationship developed out of that. And then I ended up working with Jill. And the thing that I really enjoyed, and really one of the main reasons why I was interested in working with her organization and making that switch, is that there was a big emphasis on pro bono work still. So sort of like Jenny was saying with her firm, when I was looking at different firms that were doing work, not all firms, but some firms do, require or encourage their attorneys to do pro bono work. And that was one of the pillars that, Jill Grant Associates had, that I really appreciated, and have been able to continue my pro bono work as an actual volunteer attorney through CLA when I was working at Jill Grant Associates. So it's a long explanation for how I guess I came to do the work, and a little bit about why I think it's important.
I appreciate it. Ryan and Jenny, do your firms require it? Jenny, I know you mentioned it's a part of it, but do your firms require pro bono, or do they just encourage it?
So they strongly encourage it, but like basically the way it's framed is there's, an expectation that every attorney at the firm will devote, minimum of 20 hours a year. Many attorneys devote much, much more than that, but, if you haven't devoted your hours by December, you start getting a lot of phone calls. So it's not mandatory, but I would say the participation rate, it's certainly part of the culture, and the participation rate is very, very high, and many practice groups have 100% participation or close to it.
Great.
Yeah, I think that, and I don't know if it's as strongly encouraged at my firm, but it's certainly something that is smiled upon, and everyone is given an allowance of a certain amount of time and overhead to do pro bono work. So it's something that's a common, and I find that's pretty universal at law firms of all sizes that I've worked at, is that especially for something that is sort of a community impact type project, there's always a willingness to put your name on that pro bono project. That's my feeling on it.
To piggyback off what Ryan said, I should also have said, we treat pro bono work and billable work the same. So, associates get all, an unlimited, however many pro bono hours they devote, that is treated equivalently in the firm's mind for purposes of, compensation and otherwise, as the same as work for paying clients.
Oh, that's great. That's so nice to hear.
Yeah, I would just add that was the same at Jill Grant Associates. There was a specific amount that was set aside that was, pro bono focused. And then if you went above and beyond, that was treated the same in most all situations, at least all the ones that I was involved with. And one of the projects we worked on actually ended up going like much more over, what we would normally sort of think of, had initially maybe thought time-wise, but it was a really, I think, important project that we were really, interested in and committed to. And so ended up getting to work on that. And one of the benefits there from like an individual development perspective, as an attorney who is still, relatively, I would say early, middle, probably not even middle, I guess like before middle career, is that is an opportunity for me to take on more of a leadership role in a project that I normally maybe wouldn't, be the person perhaps leading a project with a client. And so I was able to, do more of that leadership role in some ways, which was really great personal, I guess, just professional development for me in that example. Yeah.
Awesome. I'll go ahead and move us on to the next question. My computer's taking just a moment, I apologize, but I can go ahead and ask it while the slide's pulling up. What's the most memorable or impactful case that you have worked on for CLA? Mary, why don't we have you start?
Well, I'll just go ahead and start with the one that's most recent in my memory. While I was at Jill Grant Associates, I worked on a project for two main Maryland, DC based organizations, the Maryland Sierra Club and Rock Creek Conservancy, to help them put comments together on a proposed highway expansion project. So some of you on the line might be familiar, if you live in the DC region, with the Beltway expansion project that was proposed to expand 395 and 270. And some of you may also be familiar with, environmental sort of reviews and screenings that have to happen around various construction projects, including transportation projects. And in this case, that was something that had to be done. And so the groups were looking for some assistance in putting comments together on what we call the National Environmental Protection Act environmental impact statement. So really, basically the federal government and the state agency was taking a look at how would this project impact the environment. And they were looking for some assistance in drafting comments on that. So I was really excited to work with other people in my firm to work with those groups to put some robust comments together to highlight just some of the inefficiencies and insufficiencies of that review and things that were missing and that were required, either specifically expressly required by the law, state or federal law, or we thought, could have been done differently or perhaps better. And that project is still ongoing. But since submitting those comments, there has been a reduction in the proposed project size and where it would be located. Specifically, they have taken out a portion of the proposed 270 expansion, which would reduce the impact that would have on Rock Creek Conservancy. So I think the groups that we were working with saw that as an interim win. I know they have some other goals and objectives that they'd like to see long-term, because that project overarchingly is still moving forward in theory. But I think those comments, really drew out some issues that the agencies will have to take a look at and try to determine what to do from there. So I think that's one of the bigger projects that I've worked on. And one of the really nice things is that it brought a really great group of people together. We had a really good team going. It was, not just us within the firm that I was working at the time, working on the comments, but the environmental groups that we were representing. They did a lot of community building and working with a ton of other groups. I want to say something like 50 other organizations signed on to those comments. So it ended up gathering and galvanizing, I think, a lot of community support for the questions that were being asked about the project and the environmental impacts. And we ended up working with technical experts that the groups themselves went out and saw it. Some of them are volunteer experts, some of them were paid experts. And that was just sort of like a lot of collaboration that, we would, I think, traditionally see in like a, pay for legal services model that you don't maybe always necessarily get if it's just a, friend down the road who's an attorney who like helps you for a few hours or something like that. So it was a really incredible, I think, teamwork effort that was there. And actually, I'll just throw out to the Maryland Environmental Legal Clinic. They got pulled into in a good way, and they were helping support. I don't even remember at this point how that connection happened, but they ended up kind of working in various ways to support that project too. So it was just neat to see that kind of collaboration from a lot of different types of resources, not just the legal side, I guess.
I think we always are all in this together. And I think, Mary, you might have even used some of the assistance of CLA interns, which is a great addition that we provide and support that we provide to our volunteer attorneys, is that intern support if they need it.
That's right, we did. I forgot actually. Because we had so many different sort of like hands helping. We had intern support, which was really great. There was a particular Maryland legal question that, none of us had really looked into before. And we figured, well, that's what CLA does. Maybe they'll be able to help us with it. And that was the case.
Yeah, I know the clerk really enjoyed that experience as well. Jenny, do you want to talk more about the case that you worked on?
Yeah, so I did a project for Friends of the Rappahannock, which is a nonprofit that's dedicated to protecting and restoring the Rappahannock watershed, which is 195-mile long corridor that is part of the broader Chesapeake Bay watershed. And they much of that watershed, I should preface by saying, is privately owned. So Friends of the Rappahannock depends a lot on partnerships with private landowners in order to kind of implement their conservation programs. And so we developed 2 form contracts for them to use with landowners and helping them, pursue their work. The first was a form access and maintenance agreement that basically allowed them to come on to a property owner's land, install conservation measures, come back, monitor those over time, publicize them, and have had some covenants in there for the landowner to basically, maintain them, or notify Friends of the Rappahannock if something, if there was kind of like a force majeure event, right? You can imagine, you plant a bunch of trees and then there's a hurricane or something, to notify them if something like that happened. And then we also put together a form loan agreement. So there are like cost sharing programs out there for kind of larger conservation projects that might be installed on private property, but often there's a delay between when you like submit the application for the funding and then when the funding actually comes through in the form of a reimbursement, which means that the landowner potentially has to, outlay upfront costs and then doesn't get reimbursed sometimes for, several weeks, or it can even be several months. And so Friends of the Rappahannock wanted a mechanism to, effectively provide a loan that would bridge that gap to landowners that couldn't afford to take that on themselves. And so we developed a form loan agreement for them to use for that purpose. And so, like I said, it was a fun project because we collaborated internally with Kirkland. We like roped in, project, Alex and I were the environmental experts. We roped in project finance folks at Kirkland, real estate folks, even IP folks to advise on some of the publicity provisions. So it was interesting for us in that regard.
That's really neat. I think that's one of the best collaborations in seeing how much that we don't know about when we are taking on that case, and to see how it develops within your firm. I think originally we were just talking about that form loan agreement, but you were able to find all these other places that the organization could really use your assistance in formalizing those contracts, which protects the Bay for years and years to come, and they can continue to use. I mean, the impact there is not quantifiable because it just continues, which is really wonderful. So thank you. That's a great case to talk about. Ryan, do you have a case you want to share with us today?
Sure. There's been a number of memorable, I consider them impactful projects. I can't not comment on my sort of non-litigation case that you all sent me, which was very interesting, was the opportunity to submit a comment in opposition to Elon Musk's plan to put a tunnel underneath the BW Parkway. It was very transactional, and thankfully a volunteer from DLA Piper helped us write that, and it was extremely educational and probably one of the more unique experiences that I've had practicing law. But the case that I always have to talk about when I talk about CLA cases is the Marsh Landing case, which was 4 lots built proposed to be built within what was ostensibly marshland. And we started out behind the paintball because the appeal period had run, and this case had it all. It had substantive due process claims and procedural due process claims, and getting into the weeds about how do you calculate stormwater runoff over a certain square footage of impervious surface. And it was a real barn burner of a case. We're ultimately able to get the county to pull the approval of those 4 lots. My understanding is it's still empty marshland today, which I'm very proud of. There was a lot of community involvement in that case, a lot of help from CLA interns and staff as well. So I can't take all that much credit for it, really, besides showing up. But some of the hardest lawyering I've had to do, because my star expert witness unilaterally decided he was going to show up on a different day of trial. So I had to pull people out of the crowd and try to pass them off as experts and ram them through and get them admitted, and just waste some time until I could get to the next day. And I managed to get it done. That was I try to do these cases like I would a paying client with, if they're a pro bono case. This was definitely one of the more challenging cases. I love a case that's an uphill battle, and this was uphill all the way. We had a lot of legal issues regarding, the sort of the local environmental law, which is the critical area provision of Maryland law. That's not the full name of it, but it was. I could go on and on about that case, but there was a great case that I got to do through CLA.
And that was in the Magothy River watershed, correct, in Maryland?
That's right. The Magothy, at the headwaters of the Magothy River. And part of the reason this was so important was, organizations that CLA had worked with, gone out there for years and years and measured the characteristics of the river. And they always gave this nice color-coded rating. And it was always black, or, just south of black, and made a great exhibit, right? Look at this map of all the black dots of how great this river is, or should be, or couldn't be. And so this was just going to be one more brick in the wall away from a clean river that is one of the larger river that feeds directly into the bay there, sort of, I guess, I don't know, three rivers down from Baltimore City or so, if I remember correctly. But it was very important to that community. A lot of work had been done to try to rebuild a riverbed in the vicinity of this proposed development, and no one wanted to. Eventually, the county didn't want to waste its own money and see that get torn up. So, very proud of that work.
Yeah, that's really great to hear about. These are three very different cases, so it's a perfect array. We looked at one then, Ryan, you talked about in the Magothy River, which is in Maryland. Jenny joined us today to talk about the Virginia matter with the Rappahannock River, and Mary with Rock Creek in DC. And I think it touches a little bit into Maryland. So very, very interesting. Ryan, you also mentioned the Hyperloop, Elon Musk's Hyperloop matter, which is also a great example of how we have placed attorneys with other attorneys in our network to work together on cases. A comment on an EIS like Mary was describing is really long. It's not an easy comment to put together. And so especially Ryan, as a smaller firm attorney, it was, I'm sure, nice to be able to have that support from another attorney and be able to work with attorneys in the area.
Yep.
I would just say, I think, so I met Ryan when I was working at CLA, and I remember him taking on the Marsh Landing case. I don't remember exactly where it was in the process while I was there, but I remember thinking, oh, wow, he's coming back to do more work. That's great. Because I remember it was a really tough case. I mean, the community had, from what I remember of it, a good argument to be made, but there was some inconsistencies maybe in how the law had been applied. And so I always just thought really highly of the fact that Ryan came back for more after that.
It was a long case too. It wasn't short. So
2.5 years.
Yeah.
It's a great example of perhaps as attorneys, sometimes we could be a little more creative in our thinking. That took on its face, it's out, appeal period ran, oh well, SOL, but yeah, if you're willing to think outside the box, well, why did it run? What can you push your client for more details? You come up with a reason for excusable neglect or things like that. Can you see where the process was insufficient for giving notice? I think a lot of attorneys, especially on pro bono matters, are just look at the box that's been checked instead of think about what could be done differently, how to be creative. That's a great example. And see, I wasn't alone in that effort. A lot of attorneys with the county and attorneys with CLA, other attorneys with CLA helped me with that.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best things that CLA pro bono attorneys really bring to the table in representing community members throughout the watershed is this thinking outside the box approach. A lot of environmental attorneys are focusing on the environmental rules in front of them. But when we are working with attorneys like you, Ryan, who have focused on criminal matters before and a variety of different issues, or Jenny, who has done a lot more of this transactional work, it gets our mind to think outside the box when we're looking at those traditional environmental legal issues and how we can solve them.
Well, and I would just say too, like doing a really robust, ironclad, well thought out contractual document is completely outside of the four corners of what I do. And so it takes a lot of work to put those things together. And I can only imagine the different angles and things that, that project entailed, that your firm was looking at, Jenny, and pulling people in for IP and things like that. So I know that's something that I always appreciate, is when there's another skill set, I guess, brought to the table. It's just not my, attorneys tend to kind of focus on the work that they do because you want to specialize and get familiar with the certain areas of the law that you're working in. So some of that cross-pollination, I guess, is like interesting too, and something that I have had more opportunity to work on when I've done pro bono projects sometimes than maybe some of the other work that I've done, for my 9-to-5 job.
Yeah, I always tell people, tell us your legal issue and let's see if we can help, because we have this huge network of attorneys with different expertise. I'm sure we can find someone. All right, well, let's move on to our last question of the day to make sure we have some time for audience questions. How do you think someone without a legal background can support the protection and restoration of the Chesapeake Bay? Who hasn't started? Jenny.
Yeah, I mean, so Friends of the Rappahannock, the nonprofit that we partnered with on our pro bono project, I think is a great example. I mean, they have a number of volunteer opportunities that certainly don't require a legal background. I mean, they do a lot of restoration and cleanup type work, volunteer days, if you want to get your hands dirty. I mean, there's also plenty of opportunities to assist them in educational initiatives and advocacy efforts. So, there's no shortage of ways to get involved that don't require a law degree, or, don't even require sitting at a computer if you want to get out and actually, put boots on the ground.
I love a good stream cleanup. Ryan?
Similar vein, that there's certainly no shortage of a need for volunteers. In the number of organizations you all linked me up with, it's always notable that there seems to only be a handful of people ever really showing up for meetings or for hearings or conference calls. And so I think they just need more bodies in these organizations who are doing the work. And beyond a legal background, if you have any other background, you can support those organizations. And for my particular experience, one of the things we always needed in any of these cases were other experts. We needed which we don't get. I don't see a whole lot of sometimes, is volunteer project engineers or volunteer people, stormwater experts. I imagine even a volunteer accountant could help, or we could have had a volunteer cartographer, a number of other things, that other professions that could volunteer too. So just because you don't have a legal background doesn't mean you can't contribute in any way.
Yeah, that's a great point, Ryan. And we do have a volunteer form available on our website under our volunteer tab, which is open to those scientific and technical experts or individuals looking to provide assistance that might not have a legal background. Mary?
I would just say, look at what is your skill set, or what are your resources that you have available to you? What do you do well? What do you really like? Is it going in person and working on an in-person sort of volunteer call that CLA puts out? Or is it because you have some other, professional or work background that you don't maybe know how it connects, but like I was just saying, you could sort of put that information into the form or say, hey, this is what I do. I'm a transportation expert, right? I mean, that's
Yeah.
not something that I had ever really thought of. And a lot of times, like Ryan was just saying, there's a huge need still for experts of certain kinds, and they don't always have to be a qualifiable sort of, expert in the sense of you can be qualified as an expert in a court. Particularly like the project that I worked on for the Beltway project when I was with Jill Grant Associates. There were a lot of volunteers that volunteered to those organizations. So, either through CLA, or I don't even remember exactly how they all came about, but I think the call was put out that experts were needed on all these different subject areas. And people who just had an interest in it, but didn't even do it as their work necessarily, volunteered some hours on the weekends, or, a few hours here and there to take a look at it. Because in that particular example, the document that we were looking at and the set of studies that had been put together for the environmental impact of that project was thousands and thousands of pages. And so, we didn't even necessarily always have the capacity to review all of the information in a particular subcategory of issue. And so having that sort of divvied up to volunteers who looked at issues and then kind of sent us information on what they thought may or may not be, questionable, and then, we could kind of filter through that and maybe pinpoint some things that we thought, oh yeah, this is an issue. And so I think those are some examples that were really neat of just people, putting aside some time that they had. And then I know for myself now, I am a little bit like I've transitioned to a newer position with the EPA. And so I'm still sort of, looking at what my role is here with the agency, and they have pro bono work here. And it's something that I'm looking at, and I'm still a CLA pro bono attorney. But as I look toward other ways to make a contribution, I'm often looking at my local community groups, and sometimes I'll just make a donation, instead of actually maybe providing the time or hours if I don't have it within my just like work-life balance at that moment.
Yeah, that's a great point. I think Mary and Ryan especially touched on the ability as a community member to participate in public meetings. Maryland has tons of state public meetings for climate change. Virginia has public meetings that you can participate in for water permitting and air permitting. There are many ways that a member of the public can participate in their community and support the efforts of our volunteer attorneys and your local community groups. So if you are curious, please reach out to us at CLA. If you're interested in meeting some of your local community organizations, we love our clients and the organizations that we work with. Our goal is to help them be supported in legal support and voice support if that's what they need at a community meeting. So please let us know. I have a question here from the audience. What's the most common type of case that you get requests for? So I think this is kind of to me, but I'll bounce it to the attorneys in a way of what's the most common case that you are interested in working on. At CLA, we get a lot of case requests for NPDES permit issues, whether it be submitting a comment, and by NPDES, National Pollution Elimination Discharge System, Clean Water Act permits, comments. They want to submit a comment on a facility applying for a Clean Water Act permit, or they want to submit a complaint about construction stormwater runoff in their community, or they want to file a citizen suit against a violator in their community. So those, mostly we are working with Clean Water Act permits. We also get matters like Jenny worked on that are transactional or forming 501c3s or needing assistance updating an employee handbook. So Mary, do you want to start us off with what kind of cases, maybe when you're with Jill Grant or maybe as an EPA attorney that you might look for that you think you could help on?
Yeah, well, I think starting with sort of my own question that I posed to everybody else about what are your skill sets. I focus on environmental issues in my professional life. And so when I'm looking through the list, I'm looking particularly for environmental law issues. So I'm less likely to take on an intellectual property law issue, or maybe a financial assistance, contract issue. Those aren't usually the issues that I'm necessarily looking to take on. And it kind of depends too, like I was saying, stage of life, stage of work, depends where I'm at. So when I was with the law firm, I had a budgeted set of hours that I knew, and talking with my partner there, different projects that might be of interest. One of the focuses that we looked at was, is it within the community? Because there at that firm, we did a lot of work with tribal nations throughout the nation. And we didn't always necessarily have as much sort of work right here in our community. And so we were looking for things that were here so we could have an impact in the place that we live and we have fun and drink the water and all those kind of things. So that was one of the criteria I know that Jill Grant would look at there. And then now that I'm at EPA, I have a little bit of flexibility in the things that I take on, so long as it's, I'm not conflicted out. There's certain things I can't do, working with a federal agency, but I can do other environmental projects that don't have conflictual issues. And so looking for those types of things is usually kind of what I'm keeping an eye out for. Now also because I don't have a full team necessarily that would be doing the permanent project with me. I'd be looking for something that's like a little bit more bite-sized, something that I can do myself, or that I can maybe talk to CLA about teaming me up with another attorney so that we could do it together. Although I have great colleagues here at the agency who I'm sure would be interested to some extent as well. I'm still pretty new, so I'm still trying to figure out who does what, when, where, why, So I think as I'm looking at opportunities, I'm looking for stuff like that that's probably a little bit more bite-sized, or where I can partner with CLA to maybe be value added to a project that's already ongoing.
Yeah, I think this is a great place to also say that we have a variety of research projects in our back pocket that we're always looking for assistance on at Chesapeake Legal Alliance. So when there is an attorney like yourself with a governmental agency that may face more conflicts, especially when it comes to EPA Clean Water Act permits, we have these research projects that we can kind of filter through to see your interests and find one that might match your time commitment and interests. We also try to respond to some of those thoughts by sending out shorter requests around the holidays. Jenny, I know you mentioned that if your firm if you haven't done the hours at your firm, you're gonna get an email. And so around December, we try to send out quick 10-hour requests that need assistance and that you can help on to give back to your Chesapeake Bay community. So Jenny, what kind of cases do you look for? Is there usually a time commitment, or is it, based on what your schedule is looking like at work?
Yeah, for sure. I mean, I think just to speak a little more generally about kind of what I think can be helpful for attorneys at law firms, I think the matters where you can kind of quantify the time commitment, that's often something that's really helpful for lawyers as they're thinking about how they're going to balance this and, sort of fit this in with the other matters that they have. So it doesn't necessarily mean it has to be small, but it's helpful, not only to know that it's 100 hours, right? But is it 100 hours in 4 weeks, or is it 100 hours in 4 months, right? Those are two very, very different things. So I think non-litigation matters. I think generally speaking, a lot of non-litigators find it harder to find pro bono work that sort of fits with their skill set. There's a lot of pro bono litigation matters out there, and I think it's really easy at law firms for litigators to dive right into pro bono, because it often gives them a chance to appear in court or do some of these things much earlier in their career than they might be doing for paying clients. But, to the extent there are projects that tap into some of those other skill sets, be it contracts, or like you mentioned, looking at employee handbook, right? Like I can imagine that being great for a labor attorney, or, if there's something about publicity and maybe like an IP attorney could be really helpful. I think those types of projects are really appealing just because I can say, like, knowing from experience at a big law firm like Kirkland, like, you know, getting out the pro bono effort, it just our transactional attorneys and our corporate, you know, non-litigation attorneys tend to find it a little bit more challenging to find the right project for them. So I think that's really helpful as well. And, you know, sometimes those types of projects also tend to often pose less conflict issues. And so, you know, that's always something similar to what Mary said that we kind of have to have in the back of our mind, right? Like when we're deciding what to take on.
Yeah, wonderful. Ryan?
I'm sorry, the question was what kind of,
What kind of cases do you look for when
okay,
I
that's
think
right.
you kind of touched on this a little bit. You're really pulled by the impact on your community.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I got distracted thinking about how nice it would be to just have transactional matters in my life. You know, like, you know, I think it would be nice. You know, I see a lot of different cases get on that referral list from CLA. So I certainly feel like I could have a wide range of issues to address. I try to look for, these days, I try to look for more impactful ones that and a broader scope. I almost think of it geographically. And I know this is something CLA tries to avoid. There's a certain degree of NIMBY that comes through, and it's not exactly, people want to take up an issue, and it's not exactly thought out philosophically or you know, it's intellectually inconsistent with maybe what their the goals of conservation or smart growth. So I try to avoid those kind of cases and have been looking for things that have a more lasting, sort of broader geographic impact. And those have been easy to find, I think, through what have been sent. Yeah, I guess that's my thought on that.
Wonderful. Well, we are coming close to an end. I see it's 6 now. I kept it till 6:15 just in case we ran over, because it's so wonderful talking to you all about these cases and the different areas of representation that we're able to help with. But I will bring us to a close now, and thank you all for your time spent with us, and thank everyone in the audience for joining us today. If you're watching the recording, I hope you enjoyed and learned a lot. I can't leave today without saying that Chesapeake Legal Alliance is a nonprofit organization. We welcome donations from anyone interested in supporting our work, like the pro bono program that you learned about today. And in fact, we have many volunteer attorneys who choose to both financially support CLA and donate their time to their community, and we thank them all for that. We are able to protect the Chesapeake Bay because of the generous support of our donors. So thank you all. Thank you, attorneys, for joining us today, and thank you in the audience. Have a wonderful evening.
Everyone, nice to be with you.